Hi, we're Robbie Vincent. We were just talking here. It's kind of like our annual, or maybe I feel like it's more like once every 5 years now because we're getting older. But 10 years since the Miracle on the Mon match, 10 years since you were playing with the Riverhounds, a full season. Um, just your thoughts right now, like thinking like, my goodness, it's 10 years ago. Time's passed, and what are your thoughts when you think back to your time with the Riverhounds and also that specific match against Harrisburg?
Yeah, it does. I mean, on one hand, it does feel like a really long time ago. A lot's happened since then, both as a player and then as a coach. So it feels like a long time, but at the same time, like, you know, I don't know. I can still kind of picture it pretty strongly and pretty well and remember it. So, Kevin and I will talk about it every now and again. And, I know it's always fun to go back once a year and rewatch the highlights. So, yeah, it's obviously a really fun memory, one that I'll probably take, all the way through with me. So, just one of those moments, one of those games that, probably does only ever come around once in a lifetime. So,
and you travel obviously with the team. You're assistant coach now, and when you're going through the day-to-day routines of being with a team at this level now, just thinking back on what things were like 10 years ago and what they're like now, what are some of the biggest differences?
well, I think the league has grown a lot. Like, you don't get, and at the time when you're playing, 10 years ago, you don't think there's any easy games. Now the league just seems to have come a long way. You're playing against, stronger, more physical teams, a lot more technically capable. They punish you, on little mistakes. So, these guys, they have to be more dialed in every day. Training's obviously really important for us. So, I think it's because it's such a gradual kind of improvement and kind of incline. You don't notice it as much, but I think when you do think back, there was, I don't know, you have guys now who are just, like I say, bigger, stronger, faster. The league's grown a lot, so that's probably the biggest difference. And making the playoffs becomes much harder each year. Being in the top four, being in the top two, just, there's so many good teams in the league now that you got to be dialed in each week.
Yeah, and when you think about it too, the level of player, technically USL Championship, or I guess it was USL back then, was a third division. I think it was a little bit more wide open between the second and third division in terms of players' caliber. Maybe experience was a big part of it. I remember conversations with people like Hunter Gilstrap and Willie Hunt, who had played in the NASL at that time, and felt that there was a little bit more like experience maybe versus what you were at that time, and maybe Kevin as the younger players. But what were the biggest differences at that time?
It certainly felt like our league was a little bit younger. We certainly had players who were coming out of college and trying to, establish their career. That's what I was. Kevin came over, he was only a year or two older than me. We were definitely signing kind of rookies each year, and that's even kind of the case for us now. But you look around the league, and some teams definitely go with that veteran presence. You think San Antonio earlier in the year, Louisville, Charleston, they tend to go for the older, more experienced teams, and that kind of is what carries them through the season. We certainly feel that we are a team that, because we have younger guys, we're going to improve as we go through and probably be stronger come the end of the year. So, each team's going to be made up a little bit differently, but we are the second division now. You have guys falling out the MLS straight into USL. You don't have, really another league that's directly competing with us. Salaries continue to grow, so we can attract more players from different countries. I think that's probably the main reason why it's continued to grow and does continue to grow.
And when you got here, Highmark Stadium was the foundation, was the sort of the core of what everything was going to be built around. But now we're standing here at Montour, this facility, you've obviously, there's been this tremendous growth over recent years, like in terms of the resources and what the players at this level have available now. I think it's pretty interesting.
Absolutely. When I signed with the Riverhounds in 2013, I mean, the stadium is and was, a fantastic place to play, still is today. But now you're looking around the league, and a lot of teams have their own stadiums, purpose-built. A lot of them built, brand new. We just played in Rhode Island, brand new stadium. So really amazing facilities. A lot of teams now are putting up, fantastic training facilities. We went to Lexington earlier in the year. Louisville, again, great training facilities. So that's all part of it. That's part of attracting players. That's part of keeping players around. And that's going to have to continue to grow, right? We have, 3 turf fields, 2 outdoor, 1 indoor. We have a great stadium. The next step for us is getting grass fields and things like that. And there's always going to be that next step you can take. Obviously, we have a women's team now, so sharing space with them and making sure we can both be outside when we want to be outside. So just little things, and that's obviously not something that Bob or I have to directly think about day in, day out, but it's something that the club have to continue to grow with, because again, 10 years ago we had one of probably the best stadiums in the league, and now you look around and everybody's at that same level, and now we're trying to get to 15,000, 20,000, and how do we fill that? How do we keep growing our facilities to attract players? So yeah, again, it's all just part of the growth and part of the continued challenge to keep being competitive in this league.
I keep thinking back of being in City Island, and there was these, like trailers, and you guys are taking showers and we're trying to get interviews, and it was pretty primitive, wasn't it?
Yeah, and there's still the odd place that we go to that's like that. Detroit's locker rooms, are pretty old and tatty.
But they at least have like some kind of like atmosphere that they've created. That's amazing.
I love the atmosphere there. I would much rather be in that environment where everything's tight and close knit and a little bit intimidating. I think that's great. I think that's part of what makes this league so good. You don't necessarily have the MLS attendances, but you definitely have the atmosphere, and teams like Detroit certainly do that. We do a good job of that with the Steel Army. Some of the places you go to, don't necessarily have that atmosphere yet, but they're getting there. But yeah, I think that's also part of the nostalgia of going to City Island and going to Dayton back in 2013.
Wow,
and, just kind of Harrisburg had a decent atmosphere, but you go to some places and it was pretty sterile. And but yeah, again, that's kind of a thing of the past now. And most teams you go to, there's going to be a supporters section. They're going to get a good crowd, and it's not going to be just go in and get an easy result, like I say. So every game's tough, particularly on the road. And as always, we try and make sure that we take care of the home games and see what we can pick up on the road.
All right. Well, I won't let you off the hook to finish the interview. Just 2 quick questions. One about the team, the 2015 that era of Riverhounds. You obviously mentioned Kevin. You guys are both kind of close, and so he's still here. But do you have any contact with anybody else and that team and how everybody's? I mean, it seems like so many people have moved on. I think it's just Pasher is the only one still playing, right?
Yeah, I mean, periodically you just kind of bump into guys. I mean, Callie Brown is the goalkeeping coach in Colorado, so see him, once a year. Obviously, we see Tyler when he's when he's here or we're there. Like I said, I talk to Kevin quite a lot because he's still local, but you just kind of hear names pop up every now and again. I was speaking to Sterling quite regularly when he was, with our academy. So I can't remember even who it was, but I remember someone that they were talking to Anthony Arena recently. So yeah, you still kind of have those little, distant connections, but soccer's one of those games, like you move on so quick, you create new relationships. You kind of move on and you lose touch with guys, and then every now and again you'll reconnect. That's just the way it is. Yeah.
And last, I was talking to Jackson and Bob, and obviously I'm hearing rumblings that you every now and then you're still hitting some bangers in practice.
I join in every now and again. The legs are getting a little bit older and a little bit more tired. The knees are getting harder and harder to wake up each day. But yeah, every now and again Bob will need me to jump in and make up the numbers, and I always enjoy, getting a couple of shots off, and that's probably the one thing I do still have. I can still.
Yeah, that's the spot, like where you in the Miracle on the Mon, right there on the edge of the box. We always talked about that, but I don't think I've talked about it with you while we're standing on the field. But you're just lining up a shot like that, and in that moment, maybe one more time asking you this question. I probably asked you this before, but when a player is lining up a shot like that. In a big moment, like what's going through your mind, and what was going through your mind in that moment, that time?
I actually remember it really vividly because I just had to prepare in that moment that the ball was going to get played to me. I think Kevin wanted to take it direct, but Harrisburg had dropped off so deep, they were all inside their box, and where I was standing, I just knew that if they'd have rolled it to the side, that I probably had about 10 yards that I could kind of get a shot off. But what I was thinking was just hit as true on the ball as I could, keep it low and hit it as hard as I could, and that's generally what I did when I was outside the box. it was less about placement, and it was just about getting as much power on the ball as you can, and just keeping it down. So even though that ball goes into the upper corner, there was just a lot of focus on hitting it as hard as I can, keeping it down. Unfortunately, I kind of got a little bit of fade on it too. But again, if I hadn't worked on keeping it down, it probably would have gone over the crossbar. So I say that to our guys now when we're doing finishing, you know, just hit it as hard as you can, but keep it low. And if it jumps up a little bit, it's still going to stay below the crossbar. If you start aiming high, aiming for the top corners, you're probably going to miss high or miss wide. So yeah, that was all I did, and fortunately it went in. It feels now like it was meant to be. I'm sure it wasn't. If that hadn't gone in, it would have been 5-4. We would never have talked about that game again. But that one goes in, and then you think 5-5, like somehow we managed to get a point from this game, and Kevin had one more final word to say. So that's why it's such a memorable game.
All right, well, that's our trip down memory lane. I promise we probably won't need to revisit this probably for another 10 years or so. But Bobby, thanks for joining me.
You're welcome, John.
All right.